Amara lived in Lagos with her sister Zuri, and for many years, they were inseparable. They grew up sharing clothes, secrets, and dreams. Neighbors often admired their closeness, saying the two sisters were like one soul in two bodies. Amara was the quieter one, patient and thoughtful, while Zuri had a louder spirit, always wanting to be noticed. Together, they balanced each other perfectly, or so it seemed. As they grew older, life began to test that bond. Amara's kindness, her way of attracting respect without asking for it, started to bother Zuri. It wasn't obvious at first. Zuri would smile at her sister in public, but behind those smiles were small sparks of jealousy. When Amara received praise from friends or admiration from neighbors, Zuri's heart tightened. She began to wonder why people noticed Amara more, even when she herself tried so hard. Money made things worse. Though they lived under the same roof, their ideas about life began to clash. Amara was content with little, always careful with what they had, but Zuri craved more attention, more control, more wealth. That craving grew slowly into bitterness. She started keeping things from Amara, spending secretly, and speaking with sharpness instead of warmth. The sisters who once promised to stand by each other now carried unspoken wounds. What had been laughter-filled nights turned into silence at dinner. Their bond, once strong enough to face the world, was breaking quietly from within. Neither of them said it aloud, but they both felt it. Something precious between them was slipping away. It was a hot afternoon in Lagos, and the compound was busy with neighbors sitting outside, children running around, and women trading gossip. Amara had just returned from the market with a small bag of food when Zuri's sharp voice suddenly cut through the noise. At first, people thought it was the usual sisterly quarrel, but the tone in Zuri's voice was different that day. Louder, harsher, filled with something heavy. "Leave my house!" Zuri screamed, her face twisted with anger. The entire compound went quiet. Everyone turned to look. Amara froze, holding her bag tightly against her chest, unsure if she had heard her sister correctly. Zuri's eyes burned with something deeper than anger. It was envy, raw and uncovered. The neighbors whispered among themselves, shocked that Zuri would speak that way to her own blood. Amara felt her heart break, not just because of the words, but because she could see the truth behind them. This wasn't just a fight. This was Zuri's real feelings finally spilling out for everyone to witness. "You think you're better than me?" Zuri shouted, her hands waving in the air as if every neighbor needed to hear. "You walk around this compound with your quiet face, pretending to be humble. Go! I don't want you here anymore. You have nothing, Amara. Nothing." Each word was like a knife. Amara stood still, trying not to let her tears fall. She had always believed no matter what happened, Zuri would protect her. But here she was being pushed out, shamed in front of strangers. The same sister who once held her hand when they were little was now casting her out as if she were worthless. A few neighbors tried to calm Zuri down, telling her not to disgrace her sister in public, but Zuri refused to stop. Her voice grew louder, her pride stronger. She wanted everyone to know that she was the one in control, the owner of the house, the one with power. Amara finally lowered her eyes and said nothing. Sometimes silence speaks louder than words. The compound grew tense. Children stopped playing, women stopped talking, and even the men outside leaned forward to catch every detail. What hurt most was not the command itself, but the way Zuri enjoyed saying it. It was as if she had been waiting for this moment, waiting to show the world that Amara meant little to her. That afternoon, the bond they once shared died completely. Amara's chest tightened as she turned away, but she did not beg. She did not argue. She knew that once such words are spoken, they can never be taken back. And for Zuri, shouting, "Leave my house," was more than anger, it was confession. She had finally revealed the jealousy and bitterness she had carried for years, and the whole world had heard it. Amara did not say a word after Zuri's outburst. She simply stood there, her face calm, though inside her heart was heavy. She bent down, lifted her small bag, the same one she had brought back from the market, and adjusted the strap on her shoulder. That was all she carried. No suitcase, no box, no sign of wealth or possession. Just a bag that looked almost too light for a woman leaving her home. The neighbors watched closely, whispering among themselves. Some shook their heads with pity, others with judgment. "She has nothing," one woman murmured, her voice low but sharp enough for others to hear. "After all these years, not even a proper load to carry?" Another added, "So Zuri was right. The quiet one has nothing to show." Their words floated through the air, cutting deeper than silence. Children stood by the gate, their wide eyes following Amara as she walked slowly across the compound. She didn't rush. Every step carried a quiet grace, as if she wanted to leave with dignity, even though her sister had torn her apart in public. The small bag swung gently at her side, and with each movement, it seemed to announce to the world that she was leaving empty-handed. But what the neighbors couldn't see was the strength inside her. Amara refused to bow her head or argue back. She knew people expected her to cry or beg, but she did neither. Instead, she lifted her chin, looked straight ahead, and walked out as though she was not losing anything at all. That calmness confused many watching, but no one dared to speak it aloud. Behind her, Zuri stood at the doorway, arms folded, her lips curled in pride. She believed she had won. She thought she had removed a burden, cleared the space for herself, proven that she was the stronger sister. And as Amara passed through the compound gate, Zuri turned back into the house without another glance. The whispers followed Amara down the street. Some felt sorry for her, but most believed the same story, that she was leaving with nothing, that her life had been reduced to a single bag. A few even laughed quietly, thinking she would now struggle to survive without her sister's roof over her head. Amara heard their voices, but she did not let them break her spirit. She kept walking, steady and composed, her steps echoing against the dusty ground. In her silence was a strength none of them could understand. They saw a woman leaving with almost nothing, but they had no idea that hidden behind her quiet face was a secret far greater than any of them could imagine. As she disappeared from sight, the neighbors kept talking, their words filling the compound like smoke. But Amara's silence was louder than their gossip. She had lost a house, yes, but she carried with her something no one could see, something that would one day shake the same people who now whispered against her. Far away from the compound, away from the whispers and the shame, Amara walked with the same small bag. To the world, she looked like a woman who had lost everything. But behind her quiet steps lived a truth so powerful that no one around her could ever have guessed. Amara was not poor. She was not helpless. She was the hidden investor behind a multinational company worth over $500 million. Few people knew her story. Years ago, while her peers were chasing luxury and showing off what little they had, Amara was working silently, building relationships, studying opportunities, and investing carefully. She had a sharp mind for business, but she never showed it. Instead of living in wealth and drawing attention, she chose simplicity. She lived in Lagos quietly, not because she lacked riches, but because she wanted to see who truly valued her heart and not her money. She wore plain clothes, cooked simple meals, and carried herself like an ordinary woman. Nobody suspected that behind the scenes, she was signing deals across continents, moving funds through trusted partners, and holding the keys to companies that stretched from Africa to Europe and beyond. Her face never appeared in magazines. Her name was not printed in glossy business reports. She hid deliberately, preferring to watch in silence. And what did she see? She saw how people treated her when they thought she had nothing. She saw how neighbors dismissed her as the quiet one with no future. She saw how her own sister, Zuri, grew bitter, treating her as a burden rather than a blessing. Amara endured it all, holding her secret close. It wasn't weakness, it was a test. Now, as she walked away from the only home she had shared with her sister, she knew the truth had been revealed in another way. Zuri's outburst, her jealousy, her cruel words. This was exactly what Amara needed to see clearly. Zuri had failed the test. She had chosen pride, envy, and greed over love and loyalty. Amara could have defended herself. She could have shouted back in the compound, announcing her wealth, silencing the gossipers with one sentence. I own more than all of you combined. But she did not. True power doesn't need to scream. Instead, she carried her small bag and left quietly, letting the world believe its lie for now. Inside her heart, Amara smiled, not out of pride, but out of certainty. The same neighbors who pitted her today would one day read her name in the news, and the same sister who pushed her away would one day realize what she had lost. The truth was not gone. It was only waiting for the right time to shine. For now, Amara chose her silence. But behind that silence stood an empire waiting. The evening after Amara left, Zuri was glowing with pride. She walked around the compound with her chin raised high, smiling at neighbors as if she had just won a great battle. To her, chasing Amara out was not shameful, it was victory. She told anyone who cared to listen that she had finally freed herself from a burden. Inside the house, she called family members one after another. Her voice was loud, filled with excitement, almost like she was hosting a celebration. You people don't know what I've been carrying, she said over the phone. Amara has been holding me back for too long. Always quiet, always acting like she's better. Now she's gone, and I can finally live my life the way I want. Some relatives tried to ask questions, surprised by her harsh words, but Zuri didn't give them time to speak. She painted Amara as a weight she had been forced to drag for years. She made it sound as if she had done something brave, as if removing her sister was a step toward greatness. She laughed, she boasted, and she felt unstoppable. In her mind, the future was now hers alone. She began to dream out loud about all the things she could control without Amara around. The house is mine, she said, pacing back and forth with her phone in hand. The family name is mine. Everyone will see me as the strong one. No more sharing, no more pretending. From today, I'm in charge. She pictured herself as the center of attention, the one people would respect and depend on. Without Amara's quiet presence overshadowing her, Zuri believed she could finally shine. She imagined hosting family meetings, making decisions, and being praised as the one who stood on her own. In her heart, she felt a strange sense of freedom, like a chain had been broken. The neighbors added fuel to her pride. A few came by to say she had done the right thing. "At least now you can breathe," one woman told her. Another said, "That girl was only dragging you down." Zuri accepted their words like gifts, nodding and smiling, convinced that she had made the best choice of her life. That night, Zuri sat in the living room with a drink in her hand, replaying the moment she shouted, "Leave my house." She smiled to herself, satisfied, almost giddy. To her, it was a memory of power, a reminder that she was in control. She didn't see it as cruelty, she saw it as strength. But what Zuri didn't know was that in pushing Amara away, she hadn't freed herself. She had cut off the very hand that once silently held her. While she celebrated what she thought was victory, she was blind to the storm that was already gathering, a storm that would one day sweep away every dream she had just begun to build. Zuri woke up the next morning full of confidence. She was already planning what to do next. In her mind, Amara's exit meant she now had control over everything. The house, the small family businesses, even some accounts she believed were in her name. She dressed up, humming to herself, and started making calls to push her plans forward. But then the first shock came. She called the manager of a small store she thought she controlled, only to be told politely, "Madam, your name is no longer on the document. The account has been closed." Zuri froze, thinking it was a mistake. She hung up and called again, but the answer was the same. Her chest tightened. Still, she brushed it off and tried another call. This time it was about a piece of property she had been boasting about to relatives. The lawyer on the other end told her, "That property is no longer available to you. The ownership has been withdrawn." Zuri's voice cracked. "What do you mean withdrawn?" But the lawyer's answer was final. "It has been cancelled." One by one, everything she thought was hers began to disappear like smoke. Bank accounts were locked, business papers were rewritten, contracts dissolved. It was as if invisible hands were sweeping away every dream she had bragged about the night before. She shouted at bankers, threatened managers, even cried to relatives, but nothing changed. By midday, Zuri's pride had turned into panic. Neighbors who had heard her celebrating earlier now watched in silence as she paced up and down, making desperate calls that ended with slammed phone. "This cannot be happening," she screamed, her voice echoing through the compound. The same people who had praised her for being free began to whisper again, but this time with suspicion. "I thought she was in control," one man said quietly. "How can everything disappear overnight?" Another neighbor shook her head, adding, "Maybe it was never hers in the first place." Zuri's heart sank as reality became clear. All along, she had been living on Amara's grace. The businesses, the accounts, the properties, none of them truly belonged to her. She had only been enjoying the shadows of Amara's wealth, protected silently by the same sister she had humiliated. And now that Amara had walked away, she had taken everything with her. That evening, Zuri sat alone in the same living room where she had once celebrated. The laughter from last night felt like a cruel memory. Her phone was silent, her plans in ruins. She thought of Amara, the sister she had called worthless, and realized with terror that Amara had been the foundation of it all. The collapse was complete. Zuri had dreamed of controlling everything, but in the end, she was left with nothing but shame, and the haunting knowledge that the very person she had pushed away was the one who had the power to give or take everything. While Zuri was busy watching her world crumble, Amara was quietly moving forward with her true plan. She had no interest in revenge. She didn't cancel those accounts and businesses to hurt her sister. She only took back what was rightfully hers. Her heart was not focused on punishing Zuri, but on creating something greater. And so, behind the scenes, she began transferring her massive investments, worth over $500 million, to a new estate in Abuja. Abuja was different from Lagos, calmer, greener, and filled with opportunities to build without the constant noise of gossip. Amara had purchased land years ago, but it had remained untouched. Now it was time to bring her vision to life. With every transaction she made, she felt lighter, freer, and more determined to use her wealth in a way that would leave a mark on generations to come. Instead of buying luxury cars or flaunting mansions, Amara poured her money into people. She met with architects and city planners, explaining her dream of schools where children could learn without worrying about fees. She spoke about hospitals that would treat the sick with dignity, whether they were rich or poor. She described estates with clean homes for families who had spent their lives in crowded slums. Day by day, the land in Abuja began to transform. Heavy machines rolled in, clearing the ground. Foundations were laid. Walls began to rise. Workers were hired not just for the project, but as partners in the vision. Amara paid them fairly, making sure everyone who touched the project felt valued. She moved quietly, without press or fanfare, but her generosity spread quickly through whispers. People who once overlooked her in Lagos would soon hear about her name again, but this time attached to something far bigger than they ever imagined. She wasn't just building for herself, she was building for Africa, for the mothers who couldn't afford medicine, for the children who studied under streetlights, for the families who longed for a place to call home. At night, when the workday was done, Amara would walk across the estate site and smile. She thought of the insults, the whispers, the humiliation she had endured in Lagos. They no longer pained her. Instead, they gave her strength. She understood now that losing her sister's house was not a loss at all. It was a push toward her true destiny. Her empire was no longer hidden in secret bank accounts and international companies. It was now taking shape in bricks, classrooms, hospital wards, and family homes. It was becoming something that people could touch, see, and feel. Amara knew the world would eventually notice. Her silence had been her shield, but soon her actions would speak louder than any rumor or gossip. And when that day came, people would not only see her wealth, they would see her heart. Zuri could not believe how fast everything had changed. Just days ago, she was the proud sister who shouted, "Leave my house," in front of neighbors. She was the woman who bragged to family that she had finally broken free. But now, she was the one people whispered about. The same neighbors who once clapped for her pride now looked at her with pity, or worse, with amusement. She tried to carry herself with the same boldness as before. She walked around the compound with her head high, pretending nothing had happened. But gossip spreads fast, and everyone already knew the truth. The businesses were gone, the accounts were empty, and the properties she had boasted about had slipped through her fingers. Every smile she forced was met with whispers behind her back. Zuri thought she could rebuild her pride by talking louder, by acting tougher, but it only made things worse. Relatives who once answered her calls now ignored them. Friends who used to visit for drinks and laughter stopped showing up. Slowly, the crowd that had cheered her victory disappeared, leaving her alone with her shame. At night, she replayed everything in her mind. The moment she shouted at Amara. The way Amara walked out silently with only a small bag. The pride she felt celebrating afterward. Back then it felt like power. Now it felt like poison. Each memory burned her chest with regret. She realized something too late. Her greed had blinded her. She wanted the spotlight so badly, wanted control so desperately, that she destroyed the very bond that once gave her strength. She pushed away the sister who had been her silent shield, the one whose quiet presence had kept her world together. Neighbors stopped respecting her. Instead of seeing her as strong, they now saw her as reckless. She threw away her blessing with her own hands. One woman whispered to another. Zuri heard it as she passed by, and her steps faltered. She wanted to argue, to defend herself, but deep inside, she knew it was the truth. Her downfall wasn't sudden like Amara's departure. It was slow and painful. Every day brought a new reminder of what she had lost. The house felt emptier. The phone stayed silent. The stares from neighbors grew heavier. And in her own heart, the guilt grew louder than the gossip outside. Zuri tried to tell herself she could still rise, that she could still prove herself without Amara. But deep down, she knew she had cut off her own ladder. The pride that once made her stand tall now left her crawling in shame. By the time she admitted it, it was already too late. Greed had destroyed everything, and the sister she called worthless had walked away with both dignity and destiny, while she was left with nothing but regret. The news broke quietly at first. Just a small article online about a mysterious investor funding schools and hospitals in Abuja. But soon, the story spread like wildfire. Reporters dug deeper, and what they found shocked everyone. The woman behind the $500 million empire, the woman building estates for the poor and giving children a future, was none other than Amara, the same quiet sister who once walked away with a small bag. Within days, her name was everywhere. Newspapers across Africa carried her picture on the front page. TV stations called her the silent billionaire. Social media exploded with her story, and hashtags with her name began trending. People who had never met her spoke about her kindness, her humility, and her decision to use her wealth for the good of others instead of showing it off. The contrast was too powerful to ignore. Just months ago, Amara was seen as the weak one, the woman with nothing. Now the world knew she was the mind behind multinational businesses, the secret force who had chosen silence over show. Videos of the schools being built and photos of families moving into the new homes went viral. People wept at the sight of children smiling in classrooms Amara had funded. Neighbors back in Lagos were stunned. They remembered her walking out with that small bag, their whispers calling her worthless. Now those same neighbors felt ashamed. Some even admitted openly, "We misjudged her. We never knew who she really was." Relatives who had once cheered Zuri's pride now rushed to claim they had always admired Amara. They called her phone, hoping for a chance to speak to her, to connect with the sister they had ignored. But Amara did not rush to answer. She stayed focused on her work, proving that her mission was bigger than their sudden praises. Across Africa, leaders and business icons praised her. Some wanted to meet her, others wanted to partner with her. What touched people most was not just her wealth, but the way she chose to use it. She did not build towers with her name engraved in gold. She built hospitals where the poor could receive free treatment. She built homes for widows, schools for orphans, and centers for young people to learn skills. The same world that once overlooked her now celebrated her. In conferences, her name was mentioned as an example of true leadership. In homes, mothers told their children about her, saying, "Be like Amara, quiet but strong, humble but great." And as the applause grew louder, one truth became clear. The sister who had been pushed away, insulted, and called worthless had become a symbol of hope for millions. Amara had not only built an empire, she had built a legacy that stretched beyond her name, one that would outlive every whisper of doubt she had ever faced. Zuri could no longer carry the weight of her shame. The world now spoke Amara's name with honor, while hers was only remembered for greed and cruelty. One evening, she traveled to Abuja, her heart heavy, her pride broken. When she saw the massive estate Amara was building, the schools, the hospitals, the smiling families, tears filled her eyes. She realized the depth of what she had thrown away. When Amara finally appeared, dressed simply as always, Zuri fell to her knees. Her voice shook as she cried, "Forgive me, Amara. I was blind. I let jealousy destroy me. I didn't see your worth until it was too late. Please, sister, don't turn your back on me." For a long moment, Amara said nothing. She looked at her sister, broken and trembling, and remembered the day she had been cast out with nothing but a small bag. The pain of those words, "Leave my house," still echoed in her memory. But she also remembered their childhood, the days when they laughed and dreamed together. Finally, Amara stepped forward and lifted Zuri from the ground. Her voice was calm, steady, filled with both love and sorrow. "I forgive you," she said softly, "but forgiveness does not erase the past. I will never forget what happened." Zuri wept in her arms, relieved yet crushed by the truth. She knew she could never undo the damage, but she was grateful for her sister's grace. As the sun set over the estate, Amara looked out at the schools and homes rising from the land. With quiet strength, she spoke the words that would close their story forever. "I lost a house but gained an empire.